there shall be signs in the sun, and in the moon, and in the stars, and upon the earth distress of nations, with perplexity, the sea and the waves roaring, men's hearts failing them for fear, and for looking after those things which are coming on the earth. For the powers of heaven shall be shaken. One man, one microphone, one mission, one message. True News, the only newscast reporting the countdown to the second coming of Jesus Christ. And now for the most powerful hour on radio, here is End Time Newsman, Rick Wiles.
This is True News, 1 hour of uncensored news, views, and commentary. Welcome to the program. I'm Rick Wiles. Today is Wednesday, June 13, 2012. Days before the March 11, 2011 mega earthquake and tsunami that destroyed the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear reactors, Tokyo's outspoken governor predicted that Japan would begin producing nuclear warheads before the end of the year. He cited China and Russia as Japan's enemies. One of the Fukushima reactors, we later learned, was producing plutonium, a key substance needed in the production of nuclear warheads. The earthquake and tsunami rendered Japan's huge stockpile of plutonium useless. Tokyo, however, announced last week that the Japanese government will resume its production of plutonium. In May 2011, Russian nationalist politician Vladimir Zhirinovsky, vice chairman of the Russian State Duma, brazenly bragged on a Russian TV news program that Russia could deploy an arsenal of new technology weapons to destroy any part of the planet and kill over 100 million people using secret weapons. He bragged that Russia possesses energy weapons that nobody knows about. Mr. Zhirinovsky told the Russian TV news anchor woman, quote, "With them, we will destroy any part of the planet within 15 minutes. He went on to say, not an explosion, not a ray burst, not some kind of laser, not lightning, but a quiet and peaceful weapon. He warned that, quote, whole continents will be put to sleep forever and 120 million people will die. He also inferred that anybody who claims even the smallest island of the Kuril island chain would be subject to Russia's new weapons. He also made a reference to the tsunami that hit Japan, suggesting that the new weapons are related to weather control technology. And he made a cryptic warning saying, quote, "And then there will be another tsunami on the other side of the planet," end of quote. I'm recalling this information to you today because a very unusual and alarming article was posted on veteranstoday.com website on May 30. It was co-authored by U.S. Marine vet Mr. Gordon Duff and Mr. Michael Shrimpton, a barrister in Great Britain. The headline said, "Japan attack, German terror intel group complicit, confirmations of nuke move against Japan, South Korea, and U.S." The article warned that Japan's top-secret plutonium production and storage facility is facing an imminent attack by foreign powers. The co-authors said information was passed to them that a radiological catastrophe is planned for North America this summer. They said sources told them that plans are underway to use a Russian nuclear bomb to destroy Japan's top-secret plutonium weapons site. The two men state in the article that they now believe that last year's earthquake and tsunami were not natural events, but a man-made engineered attack to damage Japan's nuclear weapons program, and that it was the first volley in a radiation war against the USA. Many of you will remember that Jim Haddock and I speculated last year that the earthquake and tidal wave were the products of new Russian military weapons to take down Japan's secret weapons program. Well, according to the co-authors, Mr. Duff and Mr. Shrimpton, a repeat performance is scheduled for this summer. One of the co-authors of the article is on the telephone from Great Britain. Mr. Michael Shrimpton is a barrister specializing in national security and intelligence law. He helped negotiate the national security aspects of the General Pinochet case with the late Lieutenant General Vernon Walters, formerly Deputy Director of the CIA. He has represented and advised intelligence officers and is believed to have close connections to a number of Western intelligence services. He has briefed staff members on the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence and the Joint Congressional Inquiry into the September 11 attacks. He has participated on various panels discussing terrorism. And those panels include the Jewish Institute for National Security Affairs in Washington and at the Simon Wiesenthal Center in Los Angeles. He is a member of the International Institute for Strategic Studies, a member of Chatham House, Royal Institute of International Affairs, the United States Naval Institute, and the Royal United Services Institute. Mr. Shrimpton, welcome to True News.
Well, very kind of you to invite me. A pleasure to be on your show.
Yes, sir. May I call you Michael?
Of course you may. May I call you Rick?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Well,
I probably, my membership of Chatham House in Rusi probably isn't current. I've taken a sabbatical for 18 months to write my book, Spy Hunter, so I probably should correct that and say former member of Chatham House.
All right, a former member of Chatham House, and we all know about Chatham House rules, so I'm not going to ask you what is discussed in Chatham House.
Well, exactly.
All right. Let's talk about this article. I was really captivated by this article that appeared on the veteranstoday.com website May 30th. You gentlemen are putting forth some very, very startling, troubling information. If this is true, then a catastrophe of unbelievable proportion is being planned. So tell us. I don't know what you can tell us about your sources of information. How was this information relayed to you and Mr. Duff?
Well, obviously, as an intelligence specialist, I protect the identity of my sources. It's one of the reasons, Rick, why people trust me with intelligence. And a little bit like the late General Walters, I'm glad you referred to Vernon Walters. His friends called him Dick. Dick was a great man, and I do a little bit. My role is a little bit like his, to act as a back channel between governments, a back channel between intelligence agencies, and stuff will often come across my desk that wouldn't necessarily go through official channels. And I wouldn't say I was anywhere near as good at my job as Dick Walters was. He was the master. It was always a pleasure if you visited a foreign country to go in and see an intelligence official. It was always a pleasure to find someone who had dealt with Dick Walters. If someone had been talking to Dick, you generally knew you were talking to the right man or woman. But so I don't reveal my sources, but I can say that the original source was probably Russian on this case and was probably fairly close to the Russian military intelligence agency, the GRU. And on this one, the Russians, very much the good guys. Relations between the Russian and British governments are extremely poor, partly because the British government indulged in a wild conspiracy theory a few years ago saying that President Putin, who I think is actually a fine man, a Russian patriot, President Putin allegedly sanctioned the murder of a former Russian intelligence officer, Lieutenant Colonel Litvinenko.
Yes.
That was absolute nonsense. Litvinenko wasn't murdered at all. I think the autopsy report, I haven't seen the report, but I understand it shows that the cause of death is peritonitis. And that wild allegation led to really serious harm in Anglo-Russian relations. So it wouldn't surprise me if something from Moscow came through me or someone working with me rather than direct. Now, I think the British Foreign Secretary, William Hague, who I've known for a number of years, but our relations are a little bit strained because of the issue of the European Union, William Hague, I think, has had a briefing on this from the Russian foreign minister, Sergei Lavrov in Moscow in the last 14 days or so. And I suspect William is now more fully informed than he was back in April. But I think the original source was probably Russian. Now, the way it was done was very clever. You're familiar with the concept, many of your listeners will be familiar with the concept of dead letterboxes.
Yes.
In the 21st century, we've moved on from, I've used dead letterboxes, they're very useful. But we've moved on from the old-fashioned physical dead letterbox to electronic dead letterboxes. And one of the groups of people, some of the people I work with, are a group of computer scientists who monitor the Internet. And I don't have the time to do it, and my Internet research skills aren't as good as theirs. I'm not a computer scientist, I'm a lawyer. And what the Russians do is make very effective use of what we call an electronic dead letterbox. And a site which may be a very obscure site, it may only get a couple of hundred hits a year, a very obscure site might be used to put intelligence on, and it may only be there for an hour or two. It may only be that 2 or 3 people will see it. Now, the source will be protected, the intelligence will be sanitized, so there's no harm to Russian national security interests, but they're very, very good at using electronic dead letterboxes. And that's what happened in this case. Intelligence was put on an electronic dead letterbox, and we set about verifying it.
All right, now, Michael, was this information placed there by a Russian source who was attempting to alert and warn Americans what was being planned?
Well, at that stage, the warning was being delivered to the UK because the intelligence available, and I emphasize that in the world of intelligence, you always bear in mind the possibility that the intelligence may be wrong. You always, as I always used to tell my intelligence students, keep everything under review. If new facts emerge, then you have to revise your thinking. So an intelligence picture is a constantly changing picture, and you have to adjust to the light of new developments. You always have to be willing to review your initial conclusions. At the earlier stage of this operation, which we codenamed Vulcan in the UK, the indication was that the target was the opening ceremony of the London Olympics on the 27th of July, and the indication was that an improvised nuclear device had been smuggled into the UK. Since Al-Qaeda were making threats publicly of a catastrophic attack on Britain, and since there were Internet threats against the Queen and against the Olympics, and since there had been previous incidents of nuclear threats which had been considered by serious intelligence professionals to be credible, my team took the what we considered to be a warning from Moscow more seriously than otherwise we might have done. If we think it's coming from Moscow, then we're obviously going to look at it and treat it as potentially serious in any event.
All right, so the first warning came was that there was a possible nuclear detonation on the opening day of the 2012 Olympics in London.
Exactly, and I use the word possible advisedly, but that was the intelligence. Now, I passed that on, having done, you could only, working as an unofficial team, you could only take verification of the presence of a nuclear weapon in the UK so far, and you'll understand, Rick, if you get a report in of a nuclear device which you think may be credible, then you pass it on to the proper authorities as soon as you can. You can't just sit on a reporting that there may be a nuclear device in London.
Yes, and the opening day, I believe, is July 27th.
Yeah, July 27th. Now, the easiest way to verify the presence of a nuclear weapon is by the use of sensitive instrumentation packages on aircraft. Any covert device, and this has always been the fear, this isn't new, this goes back to the days of the Cold War. There's always been a fear that a nuclear attack wouldn't be by conventional means, aircraft or missile, but it would be a covert attack with a nuclear warhead being smuggled in. And, if you don't know the state which is sponsoring the attack, then, it's all well having a nuclear deterrent, but the nuclear deterrent breaks down if you don't know who's attacking you. And a covert nuclear attack is always something that people concerned with security have had to take. It's been a source of concern for many, many years. If you have a covert device, then you'll shield it. And the intelligence we had in this case was that there was up to 2 tons of shielding on this device. That means it gives out a very, very weak radioactive signature. That means it can't be picked up by satellite because the satellites are way up high. And even if they're in low Earth orbit, they're not going to pick up the signature from the shielded nuclear weapon. You're talking about radioactive emissions in the millisievert range, very, very low. And you need instrument packages on aircraft. As you probably know, radiation effectively reduces by the square. So a radioactive signature falls away pretty quickly. And what we were trying to do was to get an aircraft into the sky over London at a time that wouldn't alarm the public in the early hours of the morning with an appropriate instrumentation package which would detect or confirm the presence of the warhead, or equally, if the sweep comes up negative, then we can say, well, the reporting is wrong. Now, interference was run, fairly major interference was run on that operation. The RAF's fleet of E-3 Sentry aircraft was grounded for a reason that, well, my inquiries suggest doesn't stack up. So the E-3 Sentry, which is our version of the Boeing 707 that carries the airborne, what you guys call AWACS, we call them the Sentry, and the grounding of the Sentry suggests that somebody in London didn't want this warhead found. And interference was run on me at the same time. In fact, I was picked up by local police, Thames Valley Police, on a bogus excuse on April 20th, which is extraordinary. I had a conversation. I'd approached the Secretary of State for Defence, who's a guy called Philip Hammond, on the Thursday, April 19. I had a call back from Mr. Barry Burton, who is a civil servant in the Minister's private office, and he had a briefing for me on confidential terms. It wasn't a positive statement there was a nuclear weapon. It was a request for verification, in essence. He then passed that on, it is thought, to someone in the British Cabinet Office. The Cabinet Office then requested local police to arrest me, seize all my contact lists, and effectively keep me out of the way for about 12 hours.
And this happened just weeks ago?
This happened on April the 20th. Now, what appears to have been the situation was this. The insertion of the IND was by the covert German DVD, or Deutsche Verteidigungsdienst. They have an asset. They have penetrated the British Cabinet Office. They also have an intelligence operation in London called GO2, which stands for General Operations 2. General Operations 2 has assets in Thames Valley Special Branch, or believed to have assets in Thames Valley Special Branch. So the force which runs interference on me is penetrated by German intelligence. The weapon is inserted by German intelligence, and on the intelligence available is exfiltrated from the UK by German intelligence. It went into a covert German submarine. That transfer took place whilst I was in custody, so I'm taking it to custody. Then we have reporting of a transfer of a device from a stolen NHS, National Health Service ambulance, which has a 3-ton carrying capacity, a Mercedes-Benz ambulance. The warhead and shielding we estimated weighed about 3 tons. This warhead is transferred to a covert German submarine on the Blackwater River estuary in Essex, that's on the east coast of England, using an old E-boat penetration or insertion point into the UK that goes back to World War II, well known to intelligence. That transfer, I am told, was caught by an American satellite. Thank goodness.
Michael, am I hearing you correctly? I'm sitting here with my mouth hanging open.
Yeah, well, the truth
are you telling me that this nuclear device that is set for explosion at the July 27 opening of the Olympic Games, that this was transferred and placed on a German submarine?
That is the reporting that is available to us. And as I always tell my intelligence students, as I emphasized a few minutes ago, in the world of intelligence, we take reporting, we try and verify it, and we always keep an open mind, and if the facts change, our opinion changes. But that is the reporting, and I consider it to be credible.
Or this is an act of war by Germany against Great Britain.
Well, exactly, and that's why it's very sensitive, and that's why Whitehall have gone into cover-up mode. To be fair to say, I think there's a bit of a frantic cover-up going on in Whitehall at the moment.
Is this? Pardon me for interrupting. Is this connected to the meltdown of the European Union and the ascension of Germany as the dominant power in Europe?
Yeah, good, excellent question. With respect, yes, you always consider reports of threats in the light of the strategic situation. The current geostrategic situation is that Germany is afraid of losing control over the UK. The UK is on its way out of the European Union. It may take a year, it may take 2 years, it may take a couple of weeks. But the UK is moving slowly away from the European Union. Not as fast as I would like, but it's moving in the right direction. We're breaking for the open sea, Rick.
Is the purpose of this action at the opening day of the Olympics to severely weaken Great Britain to prevent the UK from exiting the Euro?
Well, yes, that's
the European Union.
That's a reasonable argument. The targets were the Queen, the opening ceremony of the Olympics, but also the City of London, because the reporting suggested the weapon was dialed. It's a dialable weapon. The reporting suggests it's one of the 4 that the German DVD lifted off the Russian submarine, the Kursk.
The target is Her Majesty, the Queen?
Yes, the Queen is due to open the London Olympics on the 27th of July, and we think the secondary target was the City of London, because the reporting suggests the warhead was set at 100 kilotons. Given where we think the warhead was, which was about 2.5 miles from the Olympics site in East London, that would have taken down the City of London, which is on the east side of the city. So it would have had a blast radius of about 15 miles, very, very heavy destruction within a 15-mile radius of 100 kilotons. That's a fairly powerful detonation. Now, I should emphasize, Rick, that I'm not suggesting the German government sanctioned this. This is nothing to do necessarily with the German government.
Well, how would it get on a German sub?
The German intelligence, I'm dealing in a way, this would be a lot easier to explain after my book Spy Hunter is published, because that Spy Hunter will give the whole history. The German intelligence wasn't shut down in 1945. The Abwehr, German naval intelligence, military intelligence, Luftwaffe intelligence, the Sicherheitsdienst organization of the SS, which was largely penetrated by the Abwehr, elements of that were all rolled up into a new intelligence organization called the DVD, German Defense Service, Deutsche Verteidigungsdienst, and that headquarters is set up in Dachau. And the establishment of headquarters goes way back before 45. The preliminary steps were taken in the fall of 1943, once the Germans appreciated they were losing World War II.
Are you telling me that the Nazi Party lives on?
No. Now, this is a mistake that my friend Christopher Story, who was sadly murdered in 2010, very nice man.
He was murdered?
Yeah, Christopher was murdered, yes, by the German DVD. That was very frustrating. Even more frustrating, being assassinated is very irritating. I had one attempt myself, and I can tell you they're a bit annoying. But poor Christopher, I had warned him about a German asset that he was talking to in the east coast of the United States. This guy was an American citizen. He was waving a badge, and I warned Christopher, this guy is dangerous, he's DVD. Christopher ignored my warning, sadly, and it was poisoned. He was given a poisoned salmon sandwich, I understand, and he announced on his website the day before he died, "I've been poisoned." In fairness, I should say his family claimed that he wasn't murdered, but I haven't seen any medical evidence to undermine Christopher's claim that he, in fact, had been poisoned. That's my understanding. Mm-hmm. Now, the DVD are not Nazis. The DVD are a continuation of German intelligence, and these are the people who installed the Nazis, but they were never Nazi. They were too smart for that. Your Nazi, on the whole, was pretty dumb, Rick. It had to be pretty dumb to be anti-Semitic. Your average Nazi wasn't that bright.
So you're saying that in the 30s, the men who ruled the German intelligence apparatus, which is now the DVD, they were the puppet masters that installed the Nazi regime?
Yeah, correct. And from 1933, when Hitler was installed, and Hitler just didn't walk into power in Germany, he was installed. From the time Hitler was installed as Vice Chancellor until the Anschluss with Austria, when the Nazis gained access to an independent means of finance, the Austrian gold reserves, up until the moment the Nazis broke free financially, they were bankrolled They'd been installed by an intelligence network that was led by General or Marshal Ludendorff, Field Marshal Ludendorff. Hindenburg was part of that network. Hindenburg didn't agree to work with Adolf Hitler because he wanted to. Hindenburg didn't like Hitler. Hindenburg agreed because he was told to. And those instructions came from German military intelligence. The network behind the Nazis was a network of bankers, industrialists, intelligence officers, military officers. That network carries forward, and we now know it as the DVD.
Is that network, and is it now connected to bankers and industrialists and
yes.
financiers in Wall Street?
Yes, because it controls offshore high-yield bank trading, and it's offshore high-yield bank trading that, and any bank in the world that is engaged in high-yield offshore trading is likely to be linked into the DVD, whether it knows it or not, because ultimate decisions on offshore trading are taken in Frankfurt, not in New York or by the Federal Reserve in Washington, despite what some may claim. So if anybody out there is thinking about getting into a high-yield program and has been fooled into believing by someone close to the Federal Reserve that it's all linked into humanitarian projects, forget it. High-yield trading is controlled by German intelligence. And that network, what you have between 1938 and 1945 is a struggle for survival and a struggle for control of Germany between the Nazis, who had their own independent intelligence network led by Reich Marshal Heinrich Himmler, who was a little bit more charming than most historians will tell you, and I've dealt with people over the years who had personal dealings with Heinrich Himmler. He was a little bit smarter as a cookie than people will have you believe. Himmler and Canaris, who headed up what became the DVD, struggled for control over German intelligence and for control of Germany herself. And it's Canaris' network that triumphed in the end. Canaris made sure, partly through someone I've spoken to, that Himmler was handed back his suicide pill, having turned himself over to the British. Heinrich and Canaris struck a deal. Admiral Wilhelm Canaris, ratted on Himmler. Himmler committed suicide. Himmler lost out. And Canaris is left in control of German intelligence at the end of World War II. He fakes his own death, and he carries on running the DVD until 1978. And the attack that Gordon and I wrote about was a follow-on from the attack in the UK. Some of your listeners may be saying, hey, when are we going to get on to Japan? The nuclear weapon, I'm arrested. I am told that I have no reason to doubt that while I'm in custody on a bogus excuse, and your listeners may assume that Thames Valley Police are going to be sued for that particular arrest, and they will be. While I'm in custody, the nuclear weapon is exfiltrated. It goes into a German U-boat. That U-boat goes to the Weser estuary in Germany. It's held. It stays there to refuel, and then appears to move out of the Weser within about 24 to 48 hours, and is then tracked, we believe, by the U.S. Navy's SOSUS network in the North Atlantic, and we then pick it up en route to Japan. And we think the Rakashimura plutonium facility, which we think was intended to be attacked on June 21, the date when I was supposed to be returning back to Aylesbury Police Station, and may still have to next week, that date we think was the intended detonation date of the same device. This is now the secondary target. So we spot the first primary target is the London Olympics and the City of London. That operation is blown by my team, acting on a tip-off, we think, from Moscow. The Germans then move to, they've always got a backup plan. They then move to the secondary target. The secondary target is Japan. Now, the DVD Rick only control at most 7 nuclear warheads, so they don't have a huge stockpile of nuclear warheads. Having had one operation blown in the UK, what looks as though happens is that warhead is then assigned to a secondary target in Japan, which will have been on the DVD target list for some time. Somebody in Dachau, where the DVD are based, decides let's move the Japanese attack forward.
Michael, why would the German intelligence apparatus seek to attack Japan?
Because the Germans and the Japanese have fallen out. One of the things that you'll find, if you're an ally of Germany, like Japan was for 90 years, if you're an ally of Germany, you'll find that the Germans will only use you, they're using you, You only stay an ally of Germany when it's in Germany's strategic interest. In the 1990s, despite an alliance with Japan that goes way back to the last decade of the 19th century, and it was German assets in London that arranged for technology transfer and the building of Japanese battleships in Britain, transfer of aircraft carrier technology after World War I, all of that is the German strategic thinking that goes way, way back to at least the last decade of the 19th century. The Germans dropped the Japanese like a hotcake in the 1990s, and that's all to do with the rise of China. So China and Japan have always been strategic competitors. The Germans switch in the 1990s from Japan to China, and we now have Germany, apparently German intelligence. I'm not saying the German government. The German intelligence, at least the covert arm of German intelligence, the most powerful part of German intelligence, involved in what looks to have been an attack on Japan. And I should reassure your listeners that the latest reporting is that after Gordon and myself blew, and I'm grateful to Gordon because I don't think this would have happened had he not had the courage to go public. After Gordon and myself went public in the article that you've referred to, the indication is that the Japanese ordered the drilling ship that we'd identified off station, and the indications are that the Type 21 U-boat that was carrying the warhead has been ordered back to Germany. So the latest reporting is that attack has been foiled, which is good news.
This is astounding. Astounding.
Yeah, well, the world, Rick, I always tell my intelligence students, the world of intelligence can be a bit stranger than fiction. You couldn't put this in the plot of a novel or stick it in a James Bond movie because people would say, nobody will believe it. But as I always told my intelligence students, and I used to lecture intelligence students, always stick to the truth. Don't worry about how people will regard the intelligence. Don't worry about whether they're going to like it or not. The job of intelligence officers is to speak truth to power and to get it right. And if you're confident you've got it right, then go with your opinion. Don't worry about... Never worry if the reporting you have stacks up and your opinion is this reporting is credible, go with your opinion. Don't worry about how it will look. Because if you're right, then usually in the long run you'll be shown to be right.
What is the long-range game plan of German intelligence?
Well, it's the old German thing of world domination. Germany has always been opposed to any country anywhere in the world governing itself independently. The Germans have always been into control, and that has been a feature of German strategic thinking since Germany was formed in 1871. And you can trace the thinking back to the Prussian intelligence service molds into the German intelligence service. You can trace that way back to Bismarck and Prussia and Wilhelm Steiber, who was Bismarck's intelligence chief. Control, invading other nations. I mean, this is the country which invaded Russia. They went to war with Britain in 1939, a country which has invaded and occupied every country in Europe, which tried to invade my country, which had plans to invade your country in World War II and in World War I. They cut a deal with Mexico, remember, in 1917.
That's right. Theodore Roosevelt discovered a plan by Germany to invade the United States.
Theodore Roosevelt is an interesting man. Theodore Roosevelt was actually backed by German money, and as I've said in my book, Spy Hunter, Theodore Roosevelt's, remember, it was the Bull Moose Party, wasn't it, in 1912?
Well, his third run for president, yes.
His third run for president. He was bankrolled covertly by Germany. I have said in the book, I don't know how much Theodore Roosevelt knew about that, because I've tended to regard Theodore Roosevelt as one of the good guys. But remember, Theodore Roosevelt comes into power after the Germans assassinate President McKinley. And as I've said in Spy Hunter, that assassination attempt is linked into German intelligence. The Germans assassinate McKinley, who is capable and competent. Roosevelt is the German favored candidate for president. But it's very unclear how much Roosevelt knew about the background to the assassination. I think people close to Roosevelt knew, but I don't think Roosevelt himself did. And Roosevelt's campaign for president in 1912 was bankrolled by Germany. Germany's always sought to interfere in American politics. Indeed, they have sought to interfere in British politics successfully, too. There's hardly a country in the world that doesn't have an active German station, hasn't suffered in some way from the depredations of German intelligence. So it's the old German goose-stepping, leather bootstrap, the old leather-booted goose-stepping approach. And I'm afraid in parts of Germany that approach is still is still very much in evidence.
Well, this has profound...
Incidentally, Rick, I'm not including... I'm not anti-German. I'm no more anti-German than Bomber Harris was in World War II, or Ira Eker. I'm not including the German government in that. And one of the reasons we know so much about the German DVD is because we get help from people, and I've had helpful conversations about the DVD with senior officials in the Chancery in Berlin, and very, very friendly conversations with the German Foreign Ministry. We get a lot of help on the DVD from inside Germany because there are a lot of people in Berlin who are extremely nervous about the DVD and who don't have this mentality. By and large, the German government don't think that way. Chancellor Merkel, well, you can have a discussion about that, but the majority of the German government don't think that way. But the old thinking still perseveres in the DVD.
Michael, these allegations have tremendous ramifications and connections to the ongoing financial woes of Europe, because Germany is in the driver's seat, and I understand. You're close friends with Nigel Farage. Nigel has openly talked about the fear that Germany is once again attempting to take over Europe. Nigel said a month ago he fears that there will be a dictatorship imposed in Europe this summer.
Well, I understand where Nigel's come. Nigel, I've known Nigel for 20 years. He's a good man. I'm a Tory. He's in UKIP, so we're in different parties. He's in the UK Independence Party, so we have different. We're members of different political parties. But I respect Nigel. I like him, and I've known him for 20 years. Nigel is right. There's no doubt that Germany is seeking to take advantage of the current euro crisis to impose a much greater degree of fiscal control over over the states in the eurozone, and fiscal control brings with it political control, because if you're deciding what another country's budget is going to be, then you're taking key decisions. And there's no doubt Germany is planning to tighten her grip over the eurozone. The UK will be excluded from that, thank goodness, and that's a major concern. So qualifying my earlier comments, to some extent now we see certainly some people at the top of the German government starting to behave like the old days. This is a humorous comment, so don't take it too literally, but somebody once put to me, about a year ago, the conspiracy theory that did the rounds of the internet that Angela Merkel was really Hitler's daughter.
Yes.
Is Angela Merkel Hitler's daughter? I said, I don't think she's nice enough. But
okay.
I make that observation. It's entirely humorous, and I intend no offence whatsoever to the Chancellor of Germany.
I've had another. Let me ask you this, Michael. I have another one of my guests has told me that he was given information that Mrs. Merkel was actually trained by the East German Communist Party.
No,
that's not true.
Again, this has caused a lot of chaos and confusion over the years. There was never a Cold War in German intelligence. German intelligence was always controlled by the DVD. Now, one of the people I discussed this with was quite a nice man, although MI6 never liked him because he had a number of British agents killed, as I explained to MI6. Well, that was his job. He was the head of German intelligence in East Germany. He was, you can't blame a German intelligence chief for having British agents killed in Germany. You could complain about it if it was happening in England, but not in Germany. And that was General Oberst Marcus Wolf. He was actually a very nice man. I liked Marcus. And Marcus was DVD, and he got very uncomfortable. If you talk to Marcus about the DVD, Marcus Wolf got very, very uncomfortable indeed. He thought we didn't know about them, and he was a bit shocked when we discovered that we did. Marcus was number 2 in the German Stasi. The boss technically was Milch. In practice, Marcus was because he was DVD and Milch wasn't. Milch was a communist. Marcus wasn't. Marcus was far more important. West German intelligence and East German intelligence were effectively both run by the DVD. Galen was also DVD. So there was never a Cold War split in Germany, and the East Germany was effectively run from Dachau, and so was Bonn. So Bonn and East Berlin tended to report to Dachau.
What about the Stasi? Who controlled the Stasi?
Well, the Stasi were controlled by the DVD. The Stasi were a DVD operation. And the same applies to the Soviet Union. Remember, the Germans bankroll the Bolshevik Revolution. Lenin was a German asset, so was Trotsky. Trotsky was probably murdered on Canaris's orders to stop him talking about the German links to Lenin and Stalin. Stalin worked for Canaris, not Hitler, but Canaris. And that is why Stalin never believed the Churchill's warning about the German invasion, because he thought Canaris would be able to stop it. Stalin always reported to Canaris, when the Russians discovered this in 1953, they very sensibly took the decision to eliminate Stalin. He was eliminated by the Russian GRU. Stalin worked for Germany. The Cold War was essentially driven from Dachau. And what you have in the Cold War was hardliners on the western side, hardliners in Moscow, and the hardliners tended to be DVD assets. All that Germany was doing was playing an age-old game of splitting off the Allies. So Germany is defeated in World War I and World War II by a combination of Britain, America, and the United States, and in World War I, France. What you have after World War II is Germany driving a wedge between Britain and the United States on the one hand, and Canada and the Western Allies, Australia, New Zealand. The Western Allies are divided from the Eastern Allies by Germany. So the Cold War was the ideological drive, the drivers for the Cold War always came from Dachau. I mean, to take an example, the George Kennan was the key German asset in the State Department for most of the post-war era.
This network that controls, the secret network that actually controls the DVD, is this an international cabal? No, the DVD itself is not controlled. I mean, the DVD is controlling. It's not controlled. It's German. It's not international, but it has assets in most countries. And but it does work. It works with, for example, the Jesuits down in the Vatican. So you've always got there's been a long tradition. There's a connection to the Jesuits in the Vatican.
Yes, the bad guys in the Vatican, no offense to the Jesuit order intended, they're some very nice Jesuits, and I've met a number of, mostly at Georgetown University. Most of the bad guys in the Vatican tend to be Jesuits. Not all Jesuits are bad guys, but most bad guys in the Vatican are Jesuits. Yeah,
I've always said that a lot of Jesuit priests are, it's really James Bond in a black frock.
Oh, it is. I mean, the Jesuit, or the Society of Jesus, is an intelligence organ. Is essentially an intelligence organ. As I said in my book, religion is not a core function of the Society of Jesus. It was the Vatican's intelligence arm. It always was.
And what is going on with this war inside the Vatican right now?
Well, that's interesting. That's good guys versus bad guys. Now, His Holiness the Pope, and I can't, it would be impertinent of me to say I'm a friend of the Pope. We've only ever had one conversation, and that was mostly with his excellent right-hand man, Monsignor Ganswein, who's a very nice man, partly because the Pope's English then, this is going back when he was Cardinal Ratzinger.
And he's German.
Yes, but see, I'm not anti-German.
No.
I can be opposed to German policy. It's a great...
Right.
Firstly, I'm an intelligence specialist. It's a terrible, terrible mistake in intelligence terms to personalize things. For example, Marcus Wolf. Now, I've talked about Marcus Wolf. I like Marcus, genuinely. He was the opposition. He was DVD. I'm British. But I could happily sit down and have a drink with Marcus. And when we had conversations, they were friendly.
Is there a German DVD connection to this war with the Vatican?
Oh, yes, I think so, because the DVD work with the Jesuits, and the DVD have their people down in the Vatican, and the Pope is very opposed to them. He's a good man. I mean, in my view, as I say, we've only ever had a conversation, and it was mostly through Monsignor Ganswein. But
so who do you think the butler worked for?
Sorry?
Who do you think the butler was working for?
I think the butler was working for the Jesuits. I think he's a Jesuit agent. It's not easy because I haven't an intelligence specialist. Any opinion I express is always going to be qualified. I've not interviewed the butler. I've not done the interrogation. I haven't seen the transcript.
Do you think the Pope's life is in danger?
Sorry?
Do you think the Pope's life is in danger?
I think it is. I mean, that was the reporting. In fact, there's been separate reporting of threats to the Vatican, and I don't think I'm breaking any confidence. I obviously wouldn't comment on anything the Vatican said to me, but I don't think I'd be breaking any confidence when I said that I passed on a warning to the Vatican around about the same time we had this operation in England of a threat to the life of His Holiness the Pope. And I have a high regard for the Pope. I think he's a good man.
Mm-hmm.
If anything came across my desk concerning the life of the Pope, then I would pass it on to the Vatican. And I think the DVD would have been aware of that. If that reporting was credible, which I think it was, otherwise I wouldn't have passed it on. If that reporting was credible, then we have a DVD involved or aware of planned attacks on His Holiness the Pope and the Queen. Obviously, I stress, Rick, that when you get reporting, you don't just pass it on just because it crosses your desk. You have to filter it. You've got to sift it and say, well, is this credible?
Mm-hmm.
Does this fit in with other intelligence?
Are we seeing glimpses of a much bigger global plan that would bring chaos to the world this year?
Well, I think I'm always slightly wary of vast, great conspiracies. What you tend to have is a series of smaller conspiracies. The German DVD worked to a plan, so they've always got clear. One thing I will say about Germany is that they are capable of clear strategic thinking, which we in Britain and you guys in the States are not always. There's always the Germans are usually working to a plan of some sort. We've seen economic chaos that was largely triggered by manufactured undermining of the credit of Western banks, and that you can trace the involvement of German banks in that going way back to the 1990s. The bundling up of poor credit with good credit and the damaging of the good credit is that can all be traced back to Frankfurt. You will see the involvement of leading German banks in a number of the. If you trace the history of the credit crunch, then there's a Frankfurt connection.
Mm-hmm.
We know Germany seeking to take political advantage of the current Eurozone crisis to increase German control over the political economy of the Eurozone member states. But yes, the Germans are working to a plan, but I'm always reluctant to attribute...
Sure.
I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I'm
right.
an intelligence specialist, and what I'm concerned with is fact. Was it factual that there was an attempt on the life of the Queen? Is it factual there was a German nuclear weapon in London? For that, we need things like satellite analysis. If there's a submarine involved, and the German DVD still control at least 3 old World War I era Type 21 U-boats, was one of the German U-boats involved? It's a question of fact. U-boats can be traced. I understand the U-boat involved in the operation in April was tracked by the Royal Navy. The Royal Navy then ordered back to port. The German submarine then moves through the channel. It's then picked up by the United States Navy on the SOSUS network, is my understanding. And these are questions of fact. Do we have a submarine out at large? If so, then it will leave a sonar signature. Who's tracking it? Are we getting positive indications? Well, we did. Where's it going? Well, the indication was it was going south, and then we had reporting that it had called in at the secret Iranian refueling facility, a submarine refueling facility in the Comoros Islands in the Indian Ocean, which is used for a lot of Iranian drug smuggling. We had reports that the U-boat was there, and then we tracked the thing.
If the
operation as well as an intelligence operation.
Michael, if the nuclear device had been detonated as planned in July at the Olympics, obviously Islamic terrorists would have been blamed for the event.
The German plan was to blame Al Qaeda. Yeah, the Germans are always willing. The DVD have set up Al Qaeda. They're always happy to if you're working with the Germans will always use you. And Al Qaeda would have got the blame, is my understanding.
Mm-hmm. Okay, but if the second scenario had taken place with the detonation in Japan, would it have been carried out in a way to make it look like one of the reactors had a hydrogen explosion?
I think in German, I can't be sure, Rick, but I suspect the Germans would have tried to blame the Russians because the new warhead would have had a Russian signature. But of course, the reporting we had about the attack on Japan, it wasn't the London. The reporting that we had of the attack on London was reporting of a detonation above ground, and there we think the intent was to blame Al Qaeda. The mode of attack in Japan, the reporting we had was the weapon had been dialed up to 500 kilotons, which is its maximum yield. That is the default setting, by the way, on the type of warhead in question, which we were told was a P-700. And some of the people we work with have significant nuclear weapons expertise. The default setting on that warhead was 500 kilotons. The intended mode of detonation was under the surface, that's subsurface, and the reporting was it was going to be installed below the surface of the sea, that's under the seabed, with an offshore drilling vessel, which incidentally was also implicated in Fukushima. And where you have these subsea detonations, you don't need to have somebody like Al-Qaeda to blame. You don't, undersea detonations are passed off, as was Fukushima, as a naturally occurring event. So the nuclear weapon would be disguised. Now, when you have an explosion like Fukushima, which was triggered, and I incidentally agree with the deputy leader of the Duma that you quoted in your very helpful introductory remarks, I agree, although that weapon is under German control, but I agree there is a high-energy weapon. One of the ground stations, which is under German control, is in Russia. And there is reporting of a high-energy weapon being used at Fukushima, and you can bombard a weak section of the Earth's crust with high energy, and you can create an earthquake. But you can only go up to about 8. It's very unclear, but it doesn't look as though these high-energy weapons can trigger much more than a Richter scale 8.5. Mm-hmm. And for Fukushima, they needed a booster. And it looks as though one of the 500 kiloton Russian warheads sold by a DVD agent who's currently in U.S. custody was used at Fukushima. I should explain for the benefit of listeners, there are two separate groups of Russian cruise missile submarine warheads that have come into the possession of the DVD. The first group, which was 2000, came off the Russian submarine, the Kursk, which was sabotaged by the DVD. Those are more modern warheads. They are dialable, so their yield is variable. You can set it. The default setting is 500 kilotons, but you can wind them down, I'm told, as low as 10. The second group was an older pattern warhead that came out of the Ukraine, and they went into Iran in 2002, 2 years later. Those are fixed yield warheads. They're much older pattern, and it is believed that one of those was used at Fukushima. Now, it's possible that one of them was also used for the Boxing Day quake, but I'm not aware of the seismic patterns for Boxing Day.
And do you believe the German DVD was behind the Fukushima?
Oh, yes. I think that has all the hallmarks of a DVD operation. So my conclusion, the word belief is something belief is for religion. Intelligence officers don't, and I'm not an intelligence officer, but I work with intelligence officers, and I'm an intelligence specialist. I do analysis. Intelligence folk tend to be wary of the word belief, because belief in the supernatural, intelligence officers hate supernatural. Intelligence guys like to deal in fact, and they prefer evidence-based conclusions. You're often having to predict what the bad guys are up to based on the known facts. But your prediction is always your analysis is always based on fact.
Is it your conclusion from what you know?
My conclusion is that Fukushima was set up by the DVD. Now, I draw, in reliance, in coming to that conclusion, some of the facts that I take into account are the DVD's control of these 500 kiloton warheads that came out of the Ukraine in 2002. Although they were stored in Iran, the DVD has substantial influence in Iran because the DVD set up the Iranian Revolution. Ayatollah Khomeini was one of their assets, for example. Now, this is a fairly powerful intelligence agency.
Michael, I need just, I've got less than 3 minutes here. I wish I had another hour.
Or we can come back on the show.
Yes, sir. One final question. So if the German DVD was behind the Fukushima disaster, if this was a man-made earthquake, tsunami, then was the USA also a target of radiation exposure?
I think the U.S. was a secondary target. The primary target was Japan. The U.S. was a secondary target in relation to the latest attack, which we now think has been abandoned. But the U.S. would have been the primary target there, as any plutonium release would have headed, atmospheric plutonium release would have headed to the United States. But just coming back very quickly, when deciding whether or not an earthquake has been triggered by a nuclear weapon, it's a seismic issue, and what you look at, the seismic in its implications, but also seismic in the geographic sense, what you're looking at is seismic signature. And if a nuclear weapon has set off an earthquake, you have a double signature. You have the unique signature of the nuclear device going off below the seabed, and then you have the quake signature. And if you've got high-energy weapons, you're looking not at the seismic signature, but you're looking at the signature of radiomagnetic energy. You're looking at effectively radio analysis. You're looking at signal analysis of the high-energy input, so that's happening in the atmosphere. Nuclear weapons under the seabed, you're looking, the evidence for that is the seismic signature, and determining whether or not Fukushima was a man-made event or a naturally occurring earthquake. The first thing you always call for is the seismic signature. What's happening? And the seismic charts will tell you. And if you have a nuclear weapon-triggered earthquake, then you've got that unique double signature. You've got the nuclear blast first, then you've got the earthquake.
Okay, so at this point right now, it's your conclusion that the target for London in July has been canceled, yep. And the secondary target in Fukushima has also been canceled because of the revelations that have come forth. I've got 20 seconds. Any knowledge of where this is going to go next?
No, and that troubles me slightly. And all I can say is I hope somebody gets that U-boat before she gets back to Germany, because she's got a nuclear weapon on board, in my view, and that's a view shared within the intelligence community. We need that nuke.
All right.
Ideally, I'd like to see nobody dead, U-boat forced to surface, crew captured, all alive, and weapons safely recovered. But I suspect that won't happen.
All right, Mr. Shrimpton, we're out of time. My guest today, Mr. Michael Shrimpton, a specialist in national security and intelligence matters in the UK. Michael, appreciate your time today on True News.
My pleasure, Rick. Pleasure to be on the show.
Well, I have to admit, I'm at a loss for words after that interview. It was far more than I was expecting to hear. This is the first time I've heard of the German super-secret intelligence agency, DVD. And I've interviewed a lot of people over the years who know about intelligence agencies. So I'm sitting here today wondering, was there a plot to detonate a nuclear bomb at next month's opening of the Olympic Games in London, killing Queen Elizabeth and tens of thousands of other people? Was the Fukushima earthquake and tsunami man-made? Is Germany plotting to rise to world domination? Who sits at the upper echelons of power inside the inner council of the German DVD? Is it the Council of 33? Is it the inner core of the Illuminati? Is it the Supreme Council of the worldwide Luciferian network seeking to bring the entire world under its control? I know Mr. Shrimpton said spies don't like to talk about the supernatural, and I'm sure that's true. But the rulers of the Illuminati know that the entire system they are seeking to build is supernatural, for they receive occult power from Satan. Jesus Christ, however, said, "All power is given unto me in heaven and in earth." And Jesus called his disciples together and gave them power and authority over all devils, and he sent them forth to preach the kingdom of God. As sons and daughters of the Son of God, you and I have spiritual authority over the powers of darkness, for Christ has given us the keys of the kingdom.